And now it says the meeting's being live streamed.
All right. Sten, we're live.
All right. Are we, Larry? I got to trust Larry, the Liberty guy. We've got a makeshift show we threw together here on In the Dugout, and I'm just as angry as you could be right now. And I just, as much as you might need to hear it, I need to get it off my chest with you guys. I need to say it. And it's something the media is not even covering. We just entered full tyranny mode in this state, and I don't say that lightly. So I'm going to explain that to you in just a bit. We're going to talk about this outrageous executive order, this outrageous action by the University of Rhode Island, this outrageous health department mandate. I mean, these people in our government are absolutely panicking. They absolutely don't care about your civil rights. And they absolutely are ignoring the science. I mean, it's outrageous. So today we're going to get into the executive order part, government's response. General Assembly, you heard us on recent shows talking about with Representative Lima, Representative Newberry, how the General Assembly it's time for them to exercise their powers and step in to end this outrageous and bogus and probably unconstitutional new second state of emergency that the governor declared last week. Who knows if they'll do anything? There's legal action. We're going to get into all that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Tomorrow, on In the Dugout, 5 p.m., back to our regular time, we'll be talking with Dr. Andrew Boston for most of the show. Again, pretty much caught red-handed that your state government, your Department of Health, is lying to you. Flat out lying to you in their zeal to try to get everybody vaccinated and masked. We're going to show you this stunning data that Dr. Boston has received. We'll tell you all about how we got it tomorrow. The question there is Governor McKee lying? Or is he just being misinformed by the liars themselves? I don't know. We won't know that. But either way, the government is lying to you. And we've got the goods on them. And we're going to show you that tomorrow. Yesterday was a very busy day for the tyrants. Executive orders, new health mandates from the Department of Health. Very busy day. And symbolically, September 1st was the day all of the governor's prior executive orders under the original declaration of a state of emergency expired. So it's like they can't go one day of freedom. The day that all the executive orders expired, according to them, they just come down heavy on us again. I mean, it's really unbelievable. All right, I'm gonna just comment on some national news items first. The Taliban in Afghanistan. This is not a Rhode Island issue so much. Well, it sort of is a Rhode Island issue in that and that Governor McKee has asked for refugees, unvetted refugees, to be let into our state, and we're happily host them, whether they're terrorists, whether they're infected, nobody cares. Whether they're self-sufficient, nobody cares. Governor McKee asked them to come into our state. You probably saw that last week. But let me play you a video that's just going to outrage you, I think. So let me bring it up. Let me share my screen. Now, I should have said it right off the top. Larry the Liberty guy is away on a business trip. So I don't even have his help today. And in the dugout, I'm going all Ronald Reagan today. I got my Ronald Reagan library shirt. I got my USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier cap on. you know, it's his principles, it's his steadfast adherence to freedom. It's that kind of leadership we need today. And I don't see anybody exerting that. So whatever I can channel by wearing this, that's what I'm doing. But so excuse me if we're a little clunky on the sharing of screens, and the look is a little different. But Larry, the Liberty guy, is not able to produce the show today. So you're stuck with me. All right, take a look at this. I won't play the whole video, but take a look at this from the Taliban.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Here they are with the booty. Some of just the weapons. In this case, it's just rifles, but you know, there's artillery and there's helicopters and there's personnel carriers and all kinds of, you know, tens of billions of dollars. Now, folks, I'm gonna play another video in a second as soon as I bring it up, but there is no administration stupid enough to just leave all that stuff behind. We obviously weren't under the pressure of being attacked where it was captured in the heat of battle. It was purposely left behind, not because of incompetence, but because of treason. The weapons, the military equipment that we just showed you and that I'm about to show you here, and the cash, wait till you see this one. Hold on. Let me share this one with you first, and then we'll talk about it. Here is the cash we left behind. What is going on here? This was a ransom payment. This was, you know, instead of paying money, well, we did pay money. We just left it behind for them so they could claim, we didn't pay anything. We just left it there in the heat of war. I mean, folks, this is negotiating with terrorists. This is supporting the international terror network between the equipment, the ammunition, the guns, and this cash. Look at all those Benjamins. I mean, I don't even know how much that is. How many billions of dollars is that? And there's the Taliban showing it off. If you have any patriotism, are you as outraged as I am? I mean, this is unthinkable, what we're seeing right here. It's absolutely unthinkable. All right, throughout the rest of the country, just some quick notes. You know, parents, you know, it's not the topic of today, but with these new executive orders, of course, are coming, these new mask mandates for kids, and parents are outraged. Parent groups are popping up. Parents are getting organized. This is going to come back to bite them. We're working with these parent groups. We're helping to organize them. And they're going to have a voice and they're going to have a say. One of the most important, two things that can be done, because we know that a lot of parents don't agree with this stuff. And when you add in critical race theory, we know a lot of teachers don't agree with this stuff. If you're a teacher, you don't have to pay union dues if you don't like your union dues being spent on advancing critical race theory and other far left agenda. Just go to mypayMySayRI.com and learn more, okay? If you're a parent, if you have the means to homeschool or to send your kids to private school, because money is all that matters for them. If you take your kids out of school, they don't get the money. If you don't pay dues, the unions don't get the money. The school districts and the unions are all about money. They don't give a darn about our children, about their education. All they care about is money. School choice is an answer. Why should any parent have to be forced to send their kid to a school that imposes these harsh mandates or teaches these outrageously anti-American Marxist curriculum. Why should any parent be forced to have their children receive that kind of education? Hey, if they want to go there, that's their choice too. If that's the education you want your kid to receive, fine. But if you don't, that's not fine. The fact that you can't escape one of these horrid government schools. So what we're about to get into, let me do one more story. Let me show you a picture here. Here is an Australian, and there's a reason I'm showing you this. This is from our friends at Unleash Prosperity. That's Stephen Moore. Here is an Australian man with his daughter out for a walk in the park, handcuffed and arrested because he wouldn't wear a mask outdoors in a public park. Nobody else around, him and his daughter. Now you ask, why did I show you that? There's a reason I showed you that, because what the governor did with an executive order last night could lead to that happening right here in Rhode Island. And I'm not kidding you. I'm going to take you through the executive order in just a few minutes. As I read it, I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned that this is America. I'm actually stunned that this is Dan McKee issuing this. He is not a radical Marxist, but yet he's doing radical Marxist policies and orders. And our General Assembly, our cowardly General Assembly, is sitting, just like me, on their butts doing nothing about it. When they could stop this invasion of our civil rights. It's unthinkable. So it all started, kind of recently with, you might have seen, heard about the press conference today with the governor and the Department of Health down at the University of Rhode Island. And here's just a blurb from Brian Crandall at Channel 10. University of Rhode Island officially put a deadline on it. All faculty and staff, don't forget, before they had required students, now it's all faculty and salaried staff, must be vaccinated by October 15th. All right, so there's step one of the tyranny. Government-run higher education institutions. Here's part two. You all heard about the mandate for vaccines for healthcare workers from the Department of Health. Well, here it is. They issued just yesterday, again, you can see yesterday, very busy day, updates on that. The October 1st deadline, right? Well, what that means is if you're going to get a Pfizer or a Moderna, you have to start getting the first dose tomorrow if you want to comply, or next week, because you have to wait 3 or 4 weeks before your second dose. They're not saying you have to start the vaccine regimen. You have to be done with the vaccine regimen by October 1st, or you could be fired, or you could lose your license to practice medicine. I talked to a doctor today, and I'm trying to get him on the show, who was infected with COVID, who obviously has the antibodies, and who, as a doctor, does not feel it's wise for him to get a vaccine. And you heard today, again, these I don't know what you call them. Again, today at the press conference, they talked about how people who have natural immunity, it's not enough that you need to have the vaccine too. There is no data to support that. We're going to talk about that tomorrow with Dr. Boston. We have talked about it with Dr. Boston. There is no data to support that. Natural immunity, we're finding out now, is superior than vaccine immunity. But yet they're pushing this. There's no excuses. So this doctor I talked to is not going to get the vaccine. He's immune. He knows he's immune. He knows he's got the antibodies. He fought it off already. He's an otherwise healthy guy. And he sounds willing. He's not daring the Department of Health to take his license away to practice medicine. But he's willing to take that risk because he feels it's in his best health interest not to take the vaccine. And if it means they're going to take his license away, then so be it. And he'll probably file legal action. To this we've come, where the government is going to be firing people, laying people off, repealing licenses to either practice medicine as an individual or as an organization. Is this really what we want government to do? You know, the debate is, well, if you're somebody receiving healthcare services, don't you want your health? You want, they don't ask. They say you want your healthcare provider. You want to know that your healthcare provider is vaccinated. No, you don't know what everyone thinks. It's going to lead to shortages of healthcare. We've heard from the firemen. It's going to be shortages from first responders who for principled reasons, religious reasons, medical reasons, don't take the vaccine, who are going to get laid off or aren't going to be able to work. It's going to lead to shortages. I would rather have a fireman come to my house if my house is on fire. I'd rather have a policeman come here if there's an incident in my house. I'd rather have a doctor be available to me if I have a problem, even if they're unvaccinated and wearing protective equipment. Then I would rather know that there's someone available than to risk someone not being available because I can only deal with people who are vaccinated. It's a false choice. Now here is the kicker. Here's the main purpose of why I just threw this show together today, because I'm so outraged. I don't even, it's going to be very hard for me to hold my tongue, hold my language. I'm watching the comments here on YouTube. Let me know if you agree. Let me know if I'm going too far. I'm watching exactly, but what I'm about to show you and tell you is so infuriating to me. So last night, by the way, and by the way, what you're about to see has not been covered in the media that I have seen. I've Googled it. I've looked around on social media. I haven't seen anything about this. But last night, in the middle of Storm Ida, which was dumping rain, the cowardly governor, rather than do it live, announce it live at a press conference, rather than put out a media release, just quietly and under the radar. Again, they're trying to trick you. They're trying to hide things from you. They're trying to shield it from a lot of public disclosure. Other media are happy to comply and not talk about it. Not on this show. In this show, we're going to talk about what needs to be talked about. And this needs to be talked about. He issued an executive order last night called the Quarantine and Isolation Order. Basically, what it says, if you receive a COVID diagnosis, or if you've been in contact with somebody who receives a COVID diagnosis, you are now mandated to quarantine, to isolate yourself, mandated. I'm going to get into what that means in a second. And you are mandated to take tests until you can prove you got to take tests every 3 to 5 days until you can prove that you're not infected. So you have to remove yourself from society. The Department of Health notifies you that you've been in contact with someone. You'll be mandated to follow their protocols, take their test, and isolate yourself. even if you don't have it, even if you don't have symptoms. There are other provisions for people in congregate care facilities. But here's the kicker. If you defy these mandates, and I want to show you the language. I didn't have a chance to make a special slide for this. But let me share my screen. If you defy those mandates, the director of the Department of Health, that's Nicole Alexander Scott, can take any action and enforce any regulations necessary to implement any action, any civil penalty for anybody who defies the governor's new mandate. Since when is the Department of Health a law enforcement agency? Since when does Nicole Alexander Scott have any idea about what a penalty should be? Does that mean people are going to get handcuffed in the park with their kids like I just showed you in Australia? In this state and around the country, I don't know if they're true, but there are images from Australia where they're apparently building isolation camps. If you're diagnosed with COVID, or who knows, if you've been in contact with someone who's been diagnosed, you might be forced to go to an isolation camp. This is what the far left radicals want. Nicole Alexander Scott is a far left radical. Will she go that far? I don't know, but she's authorized to go that far. I hear the governor says, I hereby authorize and direct the director of Rhode Island Department of Health to take any action to enforce these rules and regulations. And the General Assembly sits silent. And the General Assembly just sits back and lets it all be. I reached out to 3 high-ranking members in the General Assembly today. And I said, are you just going to sit back and let this stand? Silence. Not one response. I looked on the media for someone covering this. Silence, at least as far as I can see. Show me a news, please. Restore my faith in media somehow. Show me that there's a news story out there somehow. This is tyranny, folks. Tyranny is when government imposes its will without the consent of the people. In this case, even without their knowledge, it seems. They put this executive order in the middle of a deadly storm. It dumped record amounts of rain on us last night, knowing that that would be the news today. And that this executive order could get buried in the news. I'm going to play for you. There's a reason beyond just the public policy, the outrageous and oppressive public policy implications. Because if you believe with me, ridiculous and outrageous executive orders like this, when you know it's not backed by the science, which it's not, destroys our faith in government, destroys our faith in our elected officials. I'm going to play for you right now, and I'll stop along the way. It's about 5 minutes long, but I'm going to stop and share and comment. Testimony I gave in April to the Senate Oversight Committee about why the Executive Powers Act in Rhode Island, the Emergency Powers Act, I should say, should be reformed to necessarily include General Assembly sign-off after the initial 30 days of a state of emergency. Why we should not continue and allow the executive branch to rule our state's pandemic response on its own. So let me go to that. Again, I apologize for being a little clunky. And we'll comment along the way.
So, at least, last but not least. Mike, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Mike Stenhouse, thank you for being with us tonight. Mike's with the Rhode Island Center for
Yes.
Freedom and Prosperity. Mike, over to you.
All right, so this is a Senate oversight hearing on basically executive branch rule during the pandemic. This happened back in April, right? So just so you know that as you know now, there's no in-person witnesses or testimony allowed. You had to do it all by phone. So here we go.
Thank you, Chairman DePalma, committee members. My name is Mike Stenhouse. I'm the CEO for the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity. We're a nonpartisan, but conservative and free market think tank. I agree with your first witness today, our testifier, about the need for a return to balanced government when it comes to emergency.
So think about that. Balanced government. Does an executive order in the middle of the night authorizing new oppressive isolation and quarantine mandates and testing mandates and transferring enforcement power to the Department of Health, law enforcement now in the hands of the Department of Health, who know nothing about that. And that can be done. Your rights can be trampled. You can be fined. You could be handcuffed. You could maybe even put in some kind of hotel or camp for the infected and those contacts of the infected against your rights and without any General Assembly involvement. Does that sound like balanced government to you? Let's continue.
Management. In fact, we were the first organization to publicly call on your body, the General Assembly, to exercise its statutory rights to provide oversight and, if necessary, override some of the states of emergency and executive orders that were imposed.
Now, keep in mind that for the first 15 months of this pandemic, the General Assembly sat back and did absolutely nothing to stop Governor Raimondo and Governor McKee from doing whatever the hell they wanted to do, mostly at the behest of the Department of Health, the Marxists over there. Whatever they wanted to do, they sat back and did nothing. Now, this was a little over a year into it when I testified. As you know, in July or in June, they snuck in a provision that basically ended the executive state of emergency. But that was months after this. So let's go back. But again, I want you to listen to the testimony I gave in April and think how it's relevant to what happened with this executive order last night that I was just talking about.
Whether they were excessive or unconstitutional for any reason. I mean, you are our elected officials, and we rely on you to provide balance in government. So I would like to see this committee consider whether it's a commission or some kind of report, what is, because other states are reforming their executive orders in this regard to that sole single person rule that your prior witness talked about, to reform that, to make sure that doesn't happen again. You are the deliberative body elected by the people, the General Assembly.
So again, this is my testimony from April to the Senate Oversight Committee, chaired by the person you saw, Chairman Senator Lou DePalma. Pretty good guy, I know him. Don't like the way he votes, but pretty good guy. About executive overreach under the Emergency Powers Act. And the deliberative body. All right, so that's it. I'm going to expound on that. You'll hear in my testimony here, but I want you to think about that. With this executive order, it was this outrageous executive order that handed enforcement authority to the Department of Health. If you don't comply with these new and oppressive mandates, was there any public deliberation on that? Was there any legislative deliberation on that? No. Under executive management, executive orders, it doesn't need to be. There's no oversight. Well, there could be oversight if the cowardly General Assembly steps in. Listen more, and I'll make my case even further.
But we saw no deliberation in all the edicts that were passed down. We had to take the word that they were based on science. There was no debate. The media was largely shut out for large periods of time. And for that reason, because there was no debate, the public and most people I've talked to lost faith in their government. Why are they making these inconsistent and arbitrary decisions without any debate, without any oversight from the people we elected to represent us? I don't think it's reasonable to intrude on existing statutes or on our civil rights without General Assembly approval. The debate is the part I want to focus on today, because without any legislative oversight, there is no public debate.
Again, folks, public debate, right? When you have legislation, you have committee hearings, you have witnesses from the public, and then when a bill gets voted on in the committee, there's a debate in the committee, and then when a bill gets voted on the floor, there's a debate on the floor if somebody wants to debate it. And they can present data, and they can force the Department of Health to present the data that says, what data do you have to back up this action you're proposing? None of that happens now. None of that happens. The Department of Health has been giving us, well, you know, we've seen data that this, and we believe that, and the CDC says this. That's not data. Show us the data. Show me the data. And they don't. And they don't have to when the General Assembly sits on its butt like they've been doing. Let's continue.
We were forced to accept the executive orders or go pound sand. There was no debate. We need reforms that require, as our first witness said, Dylan, I believe, we need reforms that require the General Assembly to have a vote to consider whether or not to extend or end executive orders. And we need that public debate. The public needs that public debate so we can have faith that these decisions that impact our lives in so many ways. I mean, jobs are canceled, businesses shut down, lives are being lost, students are failing to learn. And it's all been done without any legitimate public debate.
Parental rights are being taken away, infringed upon. The list can go on and on. You might be handcuffed. You might be sent to a COVID-19 detainment center. All without any public debate. It could happen now. The door has been opened where it could happen now. If Nicole Alexander Scott decides that's what she wants to do, those are the draconian measures she wants to take, Governor McKee just gave her that authority. It happened without any public debate. It happened without any transparency. And it happened without any deliberation, public deliberation in the General Assembly. How can that be? But it is. The state is going to start laying off workers. The state is going to start revoking individual and business licenses to provide healthcare services under a bogus power of one person, the governor, under the influence, obviously, of the Department of Health, without any transparency, without any deliberation, without any public debate, without any legislative approval. To this we've come. How can that happen? But it's happening. Let's continue.
I've listened to so many hearings and floor vote debates. It's gratifying to hear the great back and forth that happens in the legislative body, the deliberative body of our government. But it didn't happen under this emergency management system. So we need that kind of legislative debate. I'm appalled that any senator.
All right, so I want you to listen right here. Let me give you the backdrop to this. The first witness was a lawyer for the executive branch. I forget her name. And she said at one point about the executive orders, we realized that one of the executive orders, and if you remember, it was the one, remember there was an executive order where Governor Raimondo said early on, if you're from New York or New Jersey or whatever it was, you can't come to Rhode Island. You remember that? She actually made that executive order. And then she realized that was probably not too good, probably wouldn't have won a court challenge. And she quickly rescinded it. So in response to that, one of the senators, and after I play a little more, I'll tell you exactly what the senator said, but that's the backdrop to what I'm about to say here in my April 6th testimony that is so relative today.
This committee would be a fan of anything that is unconstitutional.
A senator said he was a fan of that would-be unconstitutional executive order. Think about that.
No matter the perceived rationale, that needs to be debated. If we're going to infringe on constitutional rights, there better be a good debate on that.
I was about to say there better damn well be a good debate on that, but I bit my tongue knowing I was in front of a Senate committee. I don't bite my tongue here so much because this is my territory. But I bit my tongue there, that's why I paused. But the senator was Senator Stephen Archambault. I'm not sure what area is he. Is he Providence, North Providence, Johnston, somewhere over there. I don't even know where he is. But you can imagine a senator said that, oh, Madam Attorney, I was a fan of that unconstitutional action that you guys took. Think about that. They did rescind it. But as Judge Flanders from our board in the Flanders Legal Center for Freedom said,
in public,
there is no pandemic exception to the Constitution. Just because there's a pandemic does not mean our constitutional rights go away. But what that senator said, and what I commented on here, and I didn't like exposing him in my testimony, but I had to. How could I listen to that and not say something? How do you sit there and listen to a senator who swore to uphold the Constitution, and the Constitution is there to protect our civil rights? So in essence, he swore to protect our rights, and then publicly say, Senator Stephen Archambault, that he was a fan of this would-be unconstitutional executive order. We had an unconstitutional executive order last night being issued. And yet the General Assembly and the people I reached out to today are silent. let's continue with my testimony from April.
Public support or not for it. So for this reason, and I would even implore you not just to pretend this is not just to consider this a review of the past, but right now there's oversight that needs to be done.
And with the executive order I just told you about from last night, right now again, now is the time for the General Assembly to act. I mean, they're trampling over us. And they just sit back and let it all be. It's amazing.
You have the Department of Health and the executive branch acting on false premises, or at least premises that need to be debated. They refused to answer questions just last week about who gave all those highly overblown projections about how many hospital beds we would need. They said we need 2, 3, 4, 5,000, and we never got above 350 last spring or 500 this winter. They won't tell us who made those projections. The governor said last week, well, we're going to keep the state of emergency till 70% of vaccinations are distributed to Rhode Islanders, or 70% of the population. That's not what herd immunity is. We have an epidemic.
So again, like last night's executive order, like the executive action I was talking about back in April, the executive branch is making decisions on faulty science. I don't care if the CDC says it or not. We know the CDC is compromised. We know they've been politicized. We know they're all about money. They've been bought out by big pharma. Don't you understand that all of this is about the money that these pharmaceutical companies are making with these vaccines? This is not about public health anymore. You know that. I don't have to tell you. I mean, we haven't said it that much because I think it's so obvious, but let's say it now. So, we see executive action after executive action based on faulty data, and they won't even show you the data. Show me the data. Show us the data. And they don't have to under executive management, and they don't have to when the General Assembly sits on its butts. Let's go on. Let's finish up.
Epidemiologist on our board of scholars. There's more to it than just how many people get vaccinated, who has natural immunity, who has developed immunity. So we continue to make decisions that affect so many people on debatable science. And that's why we need debate. And that's why we need the General Assembly to be compelled to engage, to either vote to extend or stop the executive orders. We need balanced government. We need public debate. We need expedited judicial options as well. And these are all the types of reforms that I encourage this committee to take. I apologize for being direct, but this is very, very important to so many people. So many people believe their constitutional rights, their religious rights were infringed upon. And there was no debate. There was no process that was that we could see that would justify the infringement on those rights. So please, let's return to balanced government, even in emergency situations. And I thank you very much for your time.
Mike, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Before we go to the...
Now, I want you to hear this. Here is the Senator Archambault, who was offended that I would call him out for cheering on an unconstitutional act. So let's just continue. I just want you to see the folly of these people, okay?
The committee, I do have one question, Mike. You mentioned something about some of the work that is happening in other states, or some reforms that you might be aware of in other states.
All right, hold on a minute. It'll come right after this little exchange.
We'd definitely like to see, as a comment with the Executive Council earlier, Claire, we're going to try and look at what National Governors Association is doing. We will.
And I did send to the chairman a list of actions that other states are taking to reform their emergency powers,
as well as the Council on State Government, maybe even the Pew Charitable Trust, based on the work that they do, to see what states are doing across the country to, as I said, learn from this. So whatever you have might be available, you can send us, would be appreciated. So.
sure. And I can tell you Kentucky, Utah, Ohio, West Virginia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, North Dakota, Texas, North Carolina, Indiana are all moving bills in this regard. Most of them put a time limit on emergency powers unless the General Assembly specifically votes to extend those emergency powers. That's
And this is what needs to happen here. I mean, again, remember how silly, how crazy this is, folks. In July, the General Assembly, only because they wanted to spend money, only because they know there's $1 billion in pandemic relief aid coming to Rhode Island, and that they didn't want to let the governor decide how to spend it all. So they revoked his state of emergency just so they could get their hands on the money. They secured the money, and it's my theory that they had an unholy deal with this governor and said, if you want to declare a new state of emergency later on and reclaim another 6 months of executive powers, we'll stay out of your hair. We won't interfere. We wanted a right to gorge ourselves at the federal buffet table. You go ahead and back and do whatever the hell you want. And boy, is he doing whatever the hell he wants, handing over authority to impose fines and other civil penalties that we can't even imagine what they might be to unelected bureaucrats like Nicole Alexander Scott. This has been the trend in government lately. We see it with the Transportation and Climate Initiative. We see it with the Reggie, that where the governments are handing over authorities to these unelected bureaucrats, these unelected ideologues who are there for no reason but to advance a far left agenda. And they're empowering them, enabling them to make and enforce laws. That should not be allowed. It is the legislative branch's job to make laws, not some designated third-party group or person who's an unelected bureaucrat. This is outrageous direction for our government to be going in, but they're doing it all the time here in Rhode Island. Now, let's get to Senator Archambault's retort here, which is just, well, you'll see.
the gist of what's going on in other states.
So Mike, I tried to write it down. Kentucky, Utah, Ohio, West Virginia, North Carolina, Texas, and I missed one.
Well, you're good. Pennsylvania, Arizona, Indiana,
Thank you.
North Dakota, North Carolina. How about that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Mike? Mike, thank you very much for being with us. Much appreciated.
Thank you, committee.
Here comes Senator Archambault.
Senator Archibald.
It's not a question, it's a response. I stand by my assertion earlier to clear that the public health and safety welfare of our state clearly outweighed any argument of constitutionality.
Did you hear that? That the perceived welfare and health of people in our state supersedes any constitutional consideration. These are the people running our government.
Moment, irrespective of whether that ultimately would have been found unconstitutional.
Irrespective of whether that would have been found unconstitutional, he would have liked to have seen it go forward anyway. This is what Governor McKee did last night. So the Department of Health now has enforcement powers to impose fines and whatever other civil punishments they want if you defy the governor's new oppressive quarantine, isolation, and testing mandates. New testing mandates. Do you think, does anyone ever hear a thing about due process? Where before you can be slapped with a fine or thrown into a concentration camp or something, or COVID detainment camp, that there should be some process to that? No thought of that in the governor's executive order. No limits on what the Department of Health might do. It clearly said any action, quote, any action. You want to talk about incompetence and irresponsibility by this governor handing over enforcement authority to a bunch of medical people? Marxist medical people? It's true. Bought medical people. We showed it years ago when we fought the HPV, the human papilloma, virus mandate, vaccine mandate. We learned during that process that the CDC was bought and owned by the pharmaceutical company that was pushing those vaccines. And they're even getting a kickback on it. These are bought and sold, compromised public officials. And the governor just gave them the keys to our freedoms. The Department of Health will now punish you and they will be judge, jury, and executioner all in one, and can play with your liberties any quote, as the governor offered, any way they want. Let me say this. I have zero faith that the General Assembly will take action. You heard Charlene Lima, the deputy speaker, say on this show less than 2 weeks ago that she thought General Assembly action and intervention was necessary and warranted, and that she would speak to the speaker. But nothing came of that. You heard Brian Newberry echo the same thing. You saw Senator De Palma here, head of oversight. I mean, that's supposed to be his job. How do we reform government? I haven't seen any recommendations coming out of that committee. I haven't seen any action by the General Assembly. They're content to sit back and just let it all be. So I have zero faith, even though it's an option, it's a statutory legal option. I don't have any faith that the General Assembly will intercede. So that probably leaves the only avenue as the legal avenue. And I can tell you that there is activity there. You saw the town of Gloucester take the bold move early last week, less than 2 weeks ago, authorizing its school committee's attorney to investigate and explore whether Governor McKee's bogus declared state of emergency, the second state of emergency, is constitutional or not, and whether or not all the executive orders that have stemmed since then are constitutional or not. I can also tell you that I've been in contact with multiple national legal centers, one of whom seems very, very interested in this case. These are national groups that are monitoring executive powers abuse across the country. And I can tell you that the attorney I talked to today, I can't name them until they officially engage, but I can tell you that the attorney I talked to today agreed with me. This is outrageous what is being done. So I have some hope that some action will be undertaken in the courts. Now, the courts have been just as unwilling to intercede against the governor and contravene a governor's orders as has the General Assembly. So it doesn't, even if somebody brings an action, it certainly does not guarantee that we'll get a positive result. But at least all we can do is what we can do. And I'm working my butt off. I've given up on the lawmakers. They're just feckless. They're cowards. There are some Republicans who have stood up, but they know they have no power. They know it's not worth the fight. But I am hoping that there will be some legal action. I don't know if I have much hope that the legal action will succeed, but I do have some hope. So stay tuned and we'll keep you apprised on that. All right, we're going to close off here now. I just want to remind you tomorrow at 5 o'clock, Dr. Andrew Boston, He's got some data findings that will further infuriate you, that will prove that this government, including the governor, including the Department of Health, some of whom are directly and knowingly lying from you, some of you who may be ignorantly providing you with misinformation, but either way, the government is not giving you and the people of Rhode Island the facts. And we're going to go into that tomorrow with Dr. Andrew Boston. So I thank you for tuning in today. If you're watching this on replay, just go to rifreedom.org/live. Please subscribe if you can. And then you can look up any of our prior episodes right there. So for In the Dugout, this is a very infuriated Mike Stenhouse. I think I kept it together. I think I kept my language acceptable. I hope I did. And I hope we'll see you on tomorrow's show. See you next game. Out.